You are weak because you flee discomfort. Every hesitation, every second of thinking proves you are a slave to your mind, not the master of your reality. Your mind is not a friend. Every thought of comfort, every plea for ease, is a subtle betrayal, a parasite, feeding on your potential while convincing you it protects you. You have been trained to mistake hesitation for prudence, reflection for intelligence, and caution for virtue. In reality, these are the chains that keep you small, predictable, and replaceable. The moment you allow your mind to dictate your actions under discomfort, you surrender your sovereignty. You are no longer a strategist. You are prey. Discomfort is the battlefield. Your body trembles, your mind protests, and every instinct whispers to retreat. But this is precisely where the weak die and the strong are forged. The human brain evolved to avoid pain, avoid risk, and cling to security. It was never designed to propel you toward dominance. It was engineered to preserve your survival at minimal cost. But survival is the lowest form of existence. Mastery, power, and selection require you to override this biological programming. This chapter forces you to confront a truth you've been dodging. Your mind is a predator, and it is hunting your potential. You will feel a growing tension as your awareness sharpens. Every familiar thought that calms you in moments of unease is a trap. Every internal argument, every rationalization, is a mechanism of control, an attempt to keep you stationary while the world moves around you. This is the framework you must dismantle before any real action can occur. Recognize it. Hesitation is an identity, comfort is a lie, and passivity is a death sentence. Begin observing your mind not as yourself, but as an enemy occupying your body, whispering strategies for inaction. Track every impulse toward avoidance, every urge to delay or rationalize. Notice how it manufactures excuses, disguising weakness as morality, loyalty, or reflection. This is no accident. History, evolution, and human nature all converge to make the ordinary person obedient, restrained, and impotent. You are likely already familiar with this state. You feel it every day, but the first step toward control is naming it, identifying it, and refusing to acquiesce. The battlefield is now internal, but no less lethal. A single decision, to move while uncomfortable, to act while resisting, to strike while uncertain, creates a fissure in the predator's hold. This is the first protocol of dominance, recognizing that your mind is not your ally. When you act despite discomfort, the mind begins to respect, fear, and eventually obey you. Every delay reinforces its control. Every forced action begins to break it. Understanding this is not optional. It is a requirement. Your survival, your progress, and your evolution depend on seeing your brain for what it is, a mechanism of inertia, opposition, and subtle sabotage. You are at war with yourself, and in this war, complacency is the bullet you fire at your own head. Inaction is not a choice. It is a disease encoded into your biology. Your mind has perfected the art of stopping you without a single overt threat. It deploys fear, doubt, and hesitation as surgical weapons, paralyzing motion before you even register the danger. Every second spent overthinking, waiting for the right moment, or rationalizing. Comfort is a concession to mediocrity. Paralysis is stealthy. It wears the mask of prudence while dismantling ambition piece by piece. If you are unaware of its structure, it will consume you. The core mechanism of paralysis is simple. Anticipation of discomfort triggers an internal veto. Your body senses unease. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, thoughts scatter, and the brain interprets this as a signal to retreat. Simultaneously, cognitive loops form, repeating "not yet," "maybe later," "what if I fail?" These loops are predators in disguise, feeding on your indecision. They are not incidental. They are universal, ancient, and deeply human. Every man who hesitates is a victim of the same machinery. The weak do not collapse because of circumstance. They collapse because their neural architecture was weaponized against action, and they never learned to fight back. Understanding this mechanism requires cold observation. Fear is not a moral failing, it is a programmed signal. Inertia is not laziness. It is a biochemical trap. Overthinking is not intelligence. It is the brain's attempt to maintain homeostasis while the outside world demands aggression. When discomfort arises, whether physical strain, social pressure, or mental stress, the brain instinctively seeks the path of least resistance. That path is always retreat. Every heroic story, every act of dominance, is a tale of someone breaking this mechanism intentionally, surgically and repeatedly. You cannot hope to act without knowing how it binds you. Paralysis escalates in layers. The first layer is hesitation, the split-second decision to delay. The second layer is rationalization, constructing stories to justify retreat. The third layer is identity. When prolonged, the mind begins defining the self as incapable, cautious, and reactive. This is the quiet destruction of potential. Most men never notice the progression until the apex of discomfort, the moment they should have acted, is past, leaving them humiliated, stagnant, or broken. History is littered with examples. Brilliant soldiers who froze at decisive moments, entrepreneurs who stalled under market uncertainty, leaders who surrendered authority to hesitation. The pattern is predictable because the mechanism is predictable. To exploit the mind's machinery, you must first map it. Identify the triggers that immobilize you, the anticipatory anxiety before a challenge, the internal narrative of "I'm not ready," the physical tension signaling withdrawal. Observe how these signals escalate, how the loops tighten. Only by naming the predator can you confront it. Next, understand that discomfort itself is not the enemy, it is the crucible. Pain, stress, and uncertainty are not indicators to stop. They are indicators that the mechanism of paralysis is active. Acting within these signals is the only path to dominance. Finally, recognize the stakes. Every failure to move under discomfort reinforces the mechanism. Every concession trains your mind to expect safety over power, ease over momentum, obedience over sovereignty. Action is not optional, it is survival. Mastering this mechanism is the foundation for all future control protocols. It is the surgical strike that severs hesitation from identity. Ignore it, and you remain prey. Embrace it, and you begin the slow process of bending your mind into a weapon. Humans are predictable. Under pressure, discomfort reveals who you truly are. Some men flee, some freeze, some fabricate excuses, but all reveal a fatal weakness: submission to circumstance. These patterns are not accidental. They are archetypes, recurring templates of human failure that have persisted through every era of conflict and competition. To dominate, you must recognize them, not with empathy, but with precision. See yourself clearly, strip away self-delusion, and identify whether you are becoming predator or prey. The first archetype is the follower. He clings to direction from others, seeking guidance and reassurance as if his own instincts are unreliable. When discomfort arises, he asks, "What should I do?" rather than acting. His mind is a colony of doubts masquerading as reason. The follower survives only by obedience and imitation, never by initiative. In life's natural selection, this profile is expendable. History has shown that armies crumble when leaders hesitate and followers falter. Empires fall not from external enemies alone, but from the mass inertia of the compliant. The second archetype is the ruminator. He overthinks everything. Every choice is dissected, every possibility mapped, every outcome anticipated. The ruminator's mind is a cage, each thought a bar that prevents action. He confuses analysis with intelligence, patience with wisdom. Yet under extreme pressure, the ruminator collapses. Paralysis becomes identity. The battlefield, the boardroom, the challenge. None forgive hesitation. The ruminator is a walking cautionary tale. The more he plans, the less he executes, and the more he proves his own irrelevance. The third archetype is the comfort seeker. He avoids pain, resists strain, and crafts an environment where suffering is minimized. When stress arises, he negotiates, evades, or surrenders. His moral compass is twisted. Comfort becomes virtue, stability becomes success, and struggle becomes failure. Yet this archetype is a lie. Comfort is weakness. The comfort seeker survives barely, but never thrives. His life is a series of safe choices, each one stripping a fraction of potential, until identity itself becomes fragile and disposable. Finally, there is the masked predator, rare but worth noting. This archetype appears bold, decisive, and ruthless, but only under controlled conditions. When discomfort escalates beyond familiar territory, even the masked predator falters if untrained. He teaches the lesson that appearances are meaningless. Mastery is tested only under extreme pressure, where every instinct screams retreat. If you cannot act under discomfort, you are still a follower, a ruminator, or a comfort seeker, no matter the mask you wear. This chapter forces a mirror onto the viewer. Every reader, every listener, every man is one or a combination of these archetypes. You must identify the reflection that stares back. The process is brutal. There is no justification, no softness, no ego preservation. Awareness alone is insufficient. You must recognize how you behave under discomfort and understand the stakes of that behavior. These archetypes are not moral judgments. They are surgical diagnoses. Knowing them allows you to predict your own collapse and the collapse of those around you, giving you the advantage in a world where hesitation is a death sentence. Action is the differentiator. To ascend beyond these archetypes, you must deliberately step into discomfort, breaking the patterns that define the weak. Each instance of forced action rewires the loops of fear, hesitation, and rationalization. Each moment proves that the mind can be dominated, not by chance but by relentless protocol. Recognize the archetype within you, then crush it under the weight of action. Only then can identity begin its transformation from prey to predator. Discomfort is the crucible of power, and history is a ledger of those who surrendered to it. Every empire that fell, every army that disintegrated, every man crushed under the weight of circumstance owes its demise to the same failure, yielding to the mind's instinct to avoid pain. Hesitation is not an abstract flaw. It is a weapon of selection, wielded by nature, society, and circumstance alike. Understanding this requires a cold look at how discomfort has shaped victory and annihilation throughout human history. Consider the battlefield. Armies have been lost not through inferior numbers or poor strategy, but through hesitation under stress. Soldiers frozen in mud while opportunities passed. Commanders paralyzed by fear of the unknown. Entire regiments immobilized by the instinct to preserve life rather than seize dominance. The annals of war are filled with men whose minds betrayed them, whose very survival instincts became their executioners. Those who acted despite fear were few, and they rewrote history. Alexander at Gaugamela, Hannibal at Cannae, the storming of Normandy. Each decisive action occurred when the mind screamed retreat, yet dominance demanded movement. Beyond warfare, the same principles govern politics and power. Leaders collapse under discomfort, public scrutiny, betrayal, economic collapse. The hesitant fall first, the ruminator fades next, and the comfort seeker disappears silently, leaving a void for the relentless to exploit. Consider historical figures who thrived precisely because they acted when every instinct screamed otherwise. Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, an irreversible step into risk, was a surgical override of the mind's paralysis. Churchill during the Blitz acted with ruthless clarity, ignoring fear and discomfort, forcing a nation to move when despair threatened to immobilize. Each act of domination was an act of mental violence against the internal paralysis that threatens all who would lead. Human experiments in survival and stress reveal the same truth on a microscale. Subjects placed in extreme, uncomfortable conditions, whether under deprivation, isolation, or exposure to physical threat, exhibit the same predictable mechanisms of paralysis. Hesitation, rationalization, and identity collapse occur with ruthless consistency. Only those trained to force action through repetition, conditioning, and a conscious override of instinct survive or excel. The weak do not adapt, they succumb. Nature, history, and human biology converge on one conclusion. Discomfort is the ultimate selection process. Ignore it and you are eliminated. Dominate it and you rise. Even in everyday life, the pattern repeats invisibly. The uncomfortable conversation avoided, the risk not taken, the challenge postponed. These are minor battles with the same rules as any war. Each act of surrender reinforces the mind's control. Every hesitation conditions the brain to expect safety over action, compliance over dominance. The historical lesson is undeniable. Failure to act under discomfort is fatal, regardless of scale. Every weak man who has ever hesitated has served as a warning to the few willing to do the work of domination. The psychological truth is brutal. Discomfort is the test. Action is the weapon, and hesitation is the death sentence. Those who succeed are not stronger, luckier, or morally superior. They are disciplined in the surgical art of forcing motion. Through mental resistance, the mind can be broken, bent, or commanded, but only through relentless exposure to discomfort and deliberate action. This chapter implants the lens of inevitability. Survival, power, and sovereignty are granted only to those who move while others freeze. Everything else, the comfort, the reflection, the self-deception, is a trap. The control protocol is not a philosophy. It is a weapon. It is the deliberate, surgical method of forcing your mind into obedience under discomfort. Every man who has dominated his life, battlefield, or environment has unknowingly applied its principles. Act first, override instinct, repeat until reflex. To survive, to seize power, you must stop negotiating with your hesitation. The moment discomfort arises, your mind will scream, retreat. The protocol ensures you move anyway. Step 1. Identify the trigger. Every form of paralysis originates in a signal, physical tension, mental anxiety, or situational stress. Pinpointed. The moment you feel resistance, label it. This is the mechanism of paralysis, not reality. Recognition alone begins to weaken the mind's grip. Your body will fight. Your thoughts will fabricate reasons to delay. The predator lives in these impulses. Naming the predator is your first strike. Step 2. Initiate micro-actions. Do not attempt mastery through grand gestures immediately. Begin with small, uncomfortable motions that require conscious override. Standing when every cell demands rest. Speaking when silence tempts. Moving toward a challenge instead of retreating. Each micro-action forces the mind to respond, not resist. Like a blade hitting stone repeatedly. Repetition dulls hesitation and sharpens obedience. Momentum is built incrementally, but each step is non-negotiable. Step 3. Engage the loop override. Your brain thrives on patterns, especially avoidance patterns. To break these loops, you must interrupt them surgically. When overthinking begins, act. When fear manifests, move. When excuses surface, execute. The key is immediacy. Hesitation reinforces the pattern. Action destroys it. This is conditioning at its most ruthless. The mind learns that discomfort does not dictate motion. Your body becomes the weapon. Your intention becomes command. Step 4. Escalate the pressure. True control is forged not in comfort, but in amplified discomfort. Increase stakes intentionally. Time limits. Physical strain. Social exposure. Mental complexity. The mind will resist more fiercely. The body will protest. This is the apex of the protocol. Each escalation is a test. Each triumph over resistance a rewiring of neural pathways. What was once unbearable becomes manageable. What once paralyzed now provokes immediate response. By the time real threats arrive, the mind no longer hesitates. Step 5. Integrate identity with action. The protocol is not temporary. The goal is that forced action becomes automatic, instinctive, unavoidable. Your identity is no longer defined by comfort or fear, but by decisive motion under pressure. Habits of avoidance, hesitation, and rationalization are excised. In their place is a psyche trained to dominate itself before confronting the world. This is the surgical transformation of mind into tool, predator, and strategist. Finally, understand the cost. The control protocol is not painless. It is not convenient. Your mind will resist like a cornered animal. Physical, mental, and emotional strain are inevitable. Those unwilling to endure the discomfort will fail. Those willing will gain sovereignty over their most dangerous opponent, themselves. Action becomes not optional. It becomes the only currency for survival, power, and selection. By executing this protocol relentlessly, you convert the mind's paralysis into obedience. You train it to act when it wants to stop, to dominate when it wants to submit, to enforce control when it seeks safety. Mastery over discomfort is mastery over destiny. Hesitation is destroyed. Momentum is claimed. Weakness is eliminated. And in that vacuum, only the relentless rise. Action under discomfort does more than build discipline. It kills the old identity, the version of you that hesitated, negotiated, and waited for certainty cannot survive repeated violations of its own rules. Each forced action is a blow to that identity's authority. At first, it resists loudly. It tells you this isn't who you are, that this level of pressure is unsustainable, that you are betraying your true self. That voice is lying. What it calls your true self is merely your conditioned weakness fighting extinction. Identity is not discovered, it is enforced. The mind clings to familiarity because familiarity feels safe, even when it is corrosive. When you consistently act while uncomfortable, you introduce an internal contradiction. I feel resistance, yet I move. The brain cannot tolerate this for long. One of two things must die, the action or the identity that resists it. If action continues, the old self fractures. This is not growth, it is replacement. A hostile takeover of your internal hierarchy. This stage is where most men retreat. Not because the actions are harder, but because the psychological cost is higher. Friends notice the change. Old habits lose their grip. Comfort rituals feel hollow. You no longer relate to your previous excuses, fears, or loyalties. This is the danger zone, the liminal phase where the old identity is dying, but the new one is not fully installed. Weak men panic here and revert. Strong men apply pressure. They understand that identity death is not a crisis. It is a requirement. As the old identity collapses, a new one begins to consolidate, an identity built on response, not feeling. Discomfort no longer signals retreat, it signals engagement. Fear no longer negotiates, it informs. Thought no longer delays action, it supports execution. You stop asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" and start asking, "What must be done?" This shift is irreversible if reinforced. The mind adapts to survive under the new regime. What once felt extreme becomes baseline. What once felt impossible becomes expected. This is sovereignty. Not control over others, but control over the self that others can no longer manipulate. A man who can act under discomfort cannot be stalled, guilted, or pacified. He is no longer governed by mood, fear, or the approval of the herd. His identity is simple, cold, and functional. When pressure appears, he moves. This is why such men are rare, and why they dominate environments built on hesitation and comfort. Understand this clearly. You cannot keep your old identity and gain control. Loyalty to who you were is a trap. The past version of you was designed for survival, not dominance. Let it die. Replace it with an identity forged through repeated, deliberate action under resistance. This is not self-improvement. It is self-erasure followed by reconstruction. And once complete, there is no return to weakness, only forward motion, enforced by who you have become. Your transformation is not private. Every hesitation you once tolerated, every micro-failure you endured, has been observed by friends, enemies, and the indifferent world alike. Weakness is contagious, and the weak are always watching, waiting for an opportunity to exploit it. They study hesitation as a map to your limits, a guide to your collapse. If you falter now, if you stop enforcing the new identity, the predator you have become will be dismantled by those still shackled by their fear. The battlefield is everywhere. Comfort is the camouflage of failure, and inertia is the silent assassin. Those who cling to the old ways, the old selves, the old excuses, will attempt to lure you back. Loyalty will be weaponized, kindness will be a trap, and admiration will be bait for complacency. Do not engage, do not explain, do not justify. The weak are not your allies, they are reminders of what you once were and proof of what you must never become again. This is why vigilance is permanent. You cannot afford pauses in execution. Every day without discomfort faced is a day the mind regains territory. Every compromise is a crack in sovereignty. Momentum is fragile. Dominance is not inherited. It is seized and defended with relentless, disciplined action. You have seen the mechanism of paralysis, the archetypes of failure, the historical consequences of inaction. You have applied the control, protocol, and allowed identity, death to clear the stage. Now you must maintain it. Every moment of indecision risks undoing years of internal warfare. Understand this. Power is not a gift. Survival is not enough. The weak are everywhere, and the moment you stop acting under discomfort, they will strike, manipulate, and replace you. The predator within you exists only because you have repeatedly demonstrated dominance over your own mind. Do not negotiate, do not hesitate, do not soften. Your identity, once forged through pain and action, is now the shield and the weapon. Guard it with absolute ruthlessness. This is the final warning. The world does not wait for courage, reflection, or morality. It selects the decisive, the relentless, the men who act while the herd trembles. Weakness is visible. Power is silent. The choice is permanent. Hesitate and you vanish. Act and you dominate. Every thought, every motion, every discomfort is now a battlefield, and you are both soldier and commander. There is no other path.